Foxglove. It was a beautiful stretch of Welsh coastline, and it was at its best on a day like this. Winter's hand had loosed its grip. The earth, hard and cold as bronze for so long, was yielding, and all the buds were bursting with desire for the sun. This is Caerphilly Bay, a fairy tale name for a fairy tale place, nibbled into the coastline of Pembrokeshire in West Wales. When we were children and beginning to understand that we lived on a patch of land that could be recognised on a map, we called a map of Wales the Pig's Head, and that's exactly what it looks like. We found Caerphilly Bay right under the pig's snout. Caerphilly is flanked on either side by headlands. They reach out and curve into the water like two protective arms around the little bay. The smooth sand has been sifted to a silvery pink by the chalky limestone cliffs on the north side and the red sandstone rocks on the south. Behind the beach, grass-tufted sand dunes sweep imperiously inland, greening as they go. Before you stretches the impossibly turquoise sea, locked in perpetual surge and suck against the shore. The cliffs are peppered with caves, most of them collapsed long ago. Sometimes in stormy weather, great gusts of air, water, and even stones are hurled up through the blowholes left by the fallen cave roofs. The headlands are turned to fossilised whales, forever beached. Seagulls wheel and dip along the water's foamy edge. Fulmars ride the thermal winds over the contours of the cliffs. Gannets circle and swoop offshore. Caerphilly is a place from dreams and a place for dreaming. Once, on a day like this, an army of servants trooped down from the headland to position huge carved oak chairs on the fine carpets they'd spread across the sand. They erected canopies on poles to keep even the mildest sun from the fashionably pale faces of the ones they served, the Cawdors. The Cawdor family, descendants of that same Thane of Cawdor, immortalised by Shakespeare, once owned Caerphilly and the surrounding lands. They built the wall and the steps that still survive on the northern approach to the beach, so that generations of Cawdors could come down to eat, to drink, to make merry. On that day, servants dressed long trestle tables with white linens, and they set out huge platters of fish and meat. They piled fresh and candied fruits into crystal bowls. They arranged cheeses on smooth wooden boards and covered them with dampened cloths. They nestled warm loaves into willow baskets ranged down the length of the table. They gave centre stage to elaborate cakes and jellies, and they planted the choicest wines from the manor house cellars into buckets of ice. A serving girl unloaded crates of fruit from a cart tethered on the headland with her customary effort. When she dragged a chest of woolen shawls towards the head of the table, in case the ladies should later feel a chill, she stumbled. For the girl was pregnant. She was 16 and had left home in the village to live and work at the manor house 2 years before. She was small and fair, and her name was Fionn, the Welsh name for the foxglove. She was usually strong and lithe from many hours of lifting and stretching, fetching and carrying. But now, 7 months into her pregnancy, her belly was rounded under the concealment of her flannel skirts, and her movements, had anyone had the time or inclination to note, were slow and laboured. The father of her child was one Iestyn Griffith, head butler to the Caerphilly family. Here was a man whose humble origins, scant education, and consequently limited life chances did not sit well with his inherent laziness and sense of entitlement. He'd been apprenticed to the Caerphillys as bootboy when he was 12 years old. But he soon began to secrete books from the family's library, and he set about educating himself. He used his significant intellect, his natural wiliness, and his observations of the needs and weaknesses of others to steadily advance himself through the ranks of the household. He was appointed head butler when he was 35. New arrivals into service at the manor house soon learned that Griffith's will and whim was law, and that dismissal without references would be swift and irreversible for anyone foolish enough to complain. The household ran efficiently enough under his hand, however, and the family did not trouble themselves to wonder how such seemingly harmonious productivity was achieved, given the meagre wages and poor living conditions they provided. One night, Griffith followed Fionn as she climbed the stairs to bed. As soon as she had moved from the main corridor and onto the narrow staircase leading to the servants' quarters, he pushed her forward. She was an innocent, and she didn't know what was happening to her as her clothing was pushed up and his weight pinned her down. When it was over, and the pain and humiliation began to surface from beneath the panic, she started to sob. Griffith dragged her to her feet and pulled her face to his. He growled that if she told anyone of this, she would be turned out and disgraced. He told her to leave her door unlocked in the future. And then he was gone. So she told no one, and he continued to come to her at night. When her condition became obvious, he had reacted with disgust. He told her to rid herself of her shame. But since she had no idea what he meant, she did nothing. She eventually confided in Mrs. Price, the cook, who had shown her small kindnesses in the past. Mrs. Price, however, had witnessed too many times the fate of those who acted against Iestyn Griffith. She told the wretched girl that she could not help for fear of her own dismissal, and she advised her to go home to her parents. But Fionn was too ashamed. On the day of the feast, the Caerphilly family finally descended to the beach, and the wine waiters busied themselves at the tables. The large group of maids stood quietly to the side, waiting for a signal to replenish or remove plates. Fionn kept to the back, and when the sun dropped below the horizon, she slipped away into the gathering shadows. She was not missed until the next morning, when it was discovered that the fires had not been lit beneath the coppers in the laundry room, her first job each day. They assumed the girl had run off, so it was not until dusk, when some fishermen heard him crying, that the baby was found in a small cave on the far side of the cliff. He was wrapped in 2 woolen shawls from the chest. Some weeks later, on a beach further down the coast, they discovered Fionn's body. The child was sent home to Fionn's parents, along with a letter from Griffith, in which he said, "The girl has proved herself lacking in moral probity. It is regrettable that you failed in your Christian duty to instill in your child the modesty and virtue required of those who serve in the Caerphilly household." The letter also contained a bill for 2 ruined woolen shawls. Mrs. Price grieved for the girl and she was beset with guilt that her inaction had played its part in her death. She was further disturbed when Griffith defamed the girl to the other servants, saying that she'd been of loose moral character and had surely met the end she deserved. So, on her next day off, the cook visited Fion's parents, and she told them all she knew, partly to salve her own conscience, but also to clear Fion's name and release her parents from any sense that they might somehow have failed their daughter. Fion's parents were distraught at what they heard, but they had neither the confidence nor the connections to know how to begin to accuse someone of Griffith's standing. Mrs. Price made it clear that she was telling only them of Fion's mistreatment at Griffith's hands, but she would not do so before a court of law. So they did their best to bear the unbearable. They raised their grandson with all the love they had given but could no longer give to their daughter. And when he was a man, they told him his mother's story. But by then, Iestyn Griffith was dead, killed in an accident at a shooting party. He was supervising the field dining tables when a shot came from the woods, where men from the village were helping guests reload their guns. My grandmother told me this story. She was called Fion too, like all the firstborn girls in our family. We are all named after the first Fion, who died long ago at Barafundle Bay.